So if you're watching this, let me know if you can hear me okay. I'm about to get started. Basically, I'm just programming we're going to code out like an infinite scroll type thing for YelpCamp. Because right now, whenever you go to the Campgrounds index, it just goes on forever until you get to the end, however many there end up being. So we want to make it to where, it'll do like 20 of them, and then it'll, you'll get 20, and then when you get to the bottom of the page, it'll load another 20, and so on and so forth until you get to the very bottom. So if you can hear me, let me know in the chat. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I just discovered this infinite scroll website, which seems like it has like what we need automatically, like already made, which is kind of cool. So I might try to integrate this. Yeah, this is interesting. So I'm just gonna look through the docs real quick. So you add their CDN, and then you have a container with item elements, and this has a class of post. I assume you have to use, though you can use whatever class you want. And then you can use jQuery. We'll probably just use vanilla JavaScript. So you find the container, infinite scroll, you initialize a new infinite scroll instance, and then you pass in the container element and pagination next. I'm not sure what that is from here because I'm not seeing a class for that. And then append, you're just appending the next post to the container. I don't know what the history is for. So yeah, you can initialize infinite scroll in HTML without writing any JavaScript. You just add a data infinite scroll attribute to your carousel element. Options can be set in its value. So you have a div, class of container, you put this data attribute, infinite scroll, and then you pass it an object. And it's got the same information that you use here, so that's pretty cool. So then the options, determines the URL for the next page is required. Set the select string of a link to the next page. So this is a working example of it, which is pretty cool. Let's go look at this demo over in CodePen. So here's the vanilla JavaScript. Here's like what they already have in here, but then when you get to the bottom, it just keeps loading. So I'm not sure like where the data is coming from, because this doesn't have any URLs. So that's weird. So trying to think how I would just do this from scratch. So currently over in our routes for Campgrounds, let's make this bigger so everybody can see. We have the index, the route right here, get / campgrounds index, which is mapped to this campgrounds controller, which is mapped to this index method, which then says find the campground. Apparently you populate something called pop-up text, and then you render the index with all the campgrounds all at one time. So what we want to do is add this pagination feature where, let's think about this. I guess on the first load of the page, you just automatically load like the first X number in number of campgrounds, so it could be like 10. And then any additional requests past that point, you just send back JSON, and then you can just append that data to the DOM. So my instinct would be to use something like Mongoose Paginate. This is version 2, it's a fork I think, but it has more weekly downloads, so we'll go ahead and just assume that it's better than the original one. So we'll install it real quick. That's not it. It's actually the link to this live stream. Says it's copied to the clipboard, and then of course there it is. Okay, npm I mongoose -paginate version 2. We'll install it to the project. Says it's installed. Apparently there's some moderate, severe vulnerability, but we'll worry about that later. Okay, so the usage is you have Mongoose, and then you require Mongoose Paginate, and then you have your Mongoose schema, and then you plug in Mongoose Paginate to that schema. So this is interesting. So this, if we go over to models, we're doing this with Campgrounds. So you have your Mongoose and you have your schema, and you bring in Mongoose Paginate, and then once you define your schema, which we've already done, you plug in Mongoose Paginate to the schema. So we have our Campground schema right here. Once we're done defining it, we got some little methods that we create here, a virtual and a post hook is what they call it. So we're just gonna, below all that, we'll do this Campground schema dot plugin Mongoose Paginate, and now we should have the functionality for accessing the pagination. So pagination, if you aren't already aware, is like if there's 100 and you want to get them 10 at a time, then you just get the first 10, and then on the next page you have the second 10, and the next page. So there's 10 pages total with 10 on each page. And that allows us to break up the data so that we're not trying to load tons and tons of data on the page at one time. So in this example, you're just scrolling forever and ever and ever. And so you get all the newest campgrounds up top, and you get the oldest ones at the bottom, which is fine. But if you've got, in this case, I don't know how many we have, maybe 600, but if you had like, 60,000, this would gum up the page and make it load kind of slow. So just double checking for people that are here. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm assuming you probably can, but just drop into the chat. Little L-E-A-R-T, little alert. One of my coding, I'm working on a pagination for Campgrounds for Colt Steele's Web Developer Bootcamp, the YelpCamp project. Basically, when you go to the index page for the Campgrounds, you just get all the posts all at once. So we're going to create some pagination, and we might create some infinite scroll. Basically what we want to do is optimize it to where it's still going to behave similarly, but instead of doing all X number of campgrounds, all 600 or 6,000 campgrounds all at one time, we're just going to do them like 10 or 20 at a time, and then the user can scroll down or possibly click like a next button, and then it'll load the next ones. So we're using Mongoose Paginate version 2 and possibly this infinite scroll library. I'm not sure if this is what we need yet. I think we can probably do it ourselves a little bit simpler. Okay, so the usage is mymodel.paginate.then, or you can just await mymodel.paginate. And then Paginate takes the query as the first argument, and then any potential options, so you get to see all the different options here, and then the callback, or you can just await it. It looks like it returns a Venable promise. So yeah, just to double check. Yep, you can hear me. Awesome, thanks, Alex. Okay, so getting back to it. So now over in the campgrounds, normally where we would do a campground.find, we're going to do a campground.paginate. So we'll say campground.paginate, and then I don't know if you can add the .populate, so this is interesting. This might actually have to go into the options. So the first one is the query, and then the second one is the options, if we're looking at the docs here. And so let's see if there's something in here for populate. There is. Awesome. And so rather than pass in pop-up text like that, we're going to pass it in here into this object. So the object takes a property called populate, and then that has another object, and then I cannot for the life of me remember what goes here. It's like maybe like ref or something, but I don't know, so we're gonna look it up. So MongoDB populate, and we're gonna go to query population here, and it's probably right in front of me somewhere. So there's just populating an author, but I want the actual like object with the, again, they're just using the method there. More of the method. Here we go. This is an example that I want. So path is what we want. So not ref. Path, pop-up text. And I think you can tell it the model if there's a model in terms of like populating from a reference model, but in this case, I think just putting the path for the pop-up text should be fine. Okay, so when you say let campgrounds equal to await campground.paginate, this is actually going to be different now. So we're going to put locus in here and hope that it works. Go ahead and install it. -D is for development, so it doesn't get put into the regular dependencies in your package JSON. So npm I -D locus. And locus, if you don't already know, is like we can put this eval require locus line into our code, and then that will basically freeze the code when it hits that line, and then open it up in the terminal in kind of like a bash shell format to where we can go in there and just look at the variables that are available to us. In this case, the campgrounds variable will be available. So just to show you what that looks like, we're getting an error. Unhandled error event. Looks like I may already have a server running. So we'll go ahead and close this one. Here it is. And this is no daemon, so it's already restarted. All right, so if we go back to YelpCamp and we refresh on the index, it's just going to continually load, and that's because here it is. It's opened up. You can see this little arrow here pointing to locus. So, and then here's our little cursor, so we can say, okay, what's inside of campgrounds, just by typing it. And so it looks different now. Instead of being an array of all the objects of campgrounds, it's an array with a property called docs. And the docs are all the docs, the current page worth of docs. So it'll tell you you're on page 1. Here's 10 docs. The limit by default is 10. You can change it to anything you want. And then the next page is 2. And so if we want to send these docs, we just say campgrounds is campgrounds.docs. Or if you wanted to keep it the way it is here, what we could do instead is say something like, how would we do this? Campgrounds is equal to campgrounds.docs. And now, yeah, that's probably not a good idea because we still need access to. So let's do this. We'll say page data. Campgrounds is equal to page data.docs. And then, well, if we need a let right there. And then you can just use it like that. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Whatever you want to use is fine. So here it's already reloaded for me, but now it's only showing 10, right? So we have a couple options. We can do numbers, right? Like when you search for Google, you're familiar with like page 1. It'll have like however many, like 100 results or 50 results, whatever it is, and then page 2, 3, 4, 5. So we could do that format, or we could just have it to where when the whatever you want to call this scroll bar reaches the bottom here, then it automatically loads another 10, or we can have a next button. So we'll start with the next button just for simplicity's sake. And so then we can refactor it later because I don't know how much time I have today. So I probably won't be able to get to the end of this video, unfortunately. But if we use the next button, that might speed things up a little bit. So let's go wire that up over in the views. If you go to campgrounds, index, the way this is currently formatted, we have a for loop here for each campground in campgrounds. And then at the very bottom of that is where we'd want to put our button. So let's just do a button here, and we give it a class of button primary. which is just going to be the regular large button, I think. And then let's say, actually what we can do, just to simplify things, is we can put an anchor tag, because it's going to have to go to a route, right? And we can say next, or view more, I guess is more obvious. God, I can't spell for shadooby. All right, so this is going to go to Campgrounds, but then it's going to have a query string. This is where things get kind of cool, I guess. So you're going to say page is equal to, and then you're going to use EJS syntax to pass in, let's say campgrounds dot next page, okay? And so the next page could be 2, 3, whatever. It's going to be dynamic. All right, so then up here where we have campground of campgrounds, really what we need to do is change this to campground.docs, campgrounds.docs, and then back over in the routes, instead of doing all this stuff, we go back to how we had it, to where we say const campgrounds is equal to paginate blah blah, and then we pass in campgrounds. So now in the view is where we handle extracting the 10 docs that are currently on that current page, and then we have this link to the next page. So check this out. It's not going to do anything yet because we don't have the route wired up, but so it's still loading the 10 campgrounds, and now there's this view more button, although it didn't get the styling that I wanted it. So let's go back and check that. Oh, we never put a class. So this is an anchor tag, and we say class is equal to button primary, and then we want this to be centered or whatever. So I think you can use text center. If that doesn't work, we can, yeah, you probably need to put it like inside of a parent div or something. Let's try that. If that doesn't work, there we go. All right, and then it would be nice if we had some padding down here on the bottom, so we could do something like, or margin rather. So we'll say margin bottom and B, give it the maximum amount of margin. That's good. All right, so if we click on view more, it just takes us to the same page, except now up at the top you see that it has a query string, page is equal to 2. So this is still the same data, right? The first one is Fasiri. If we go back to the regular page 1, the first one is Fasiri. So it hasn't actually switched and given us the second page worth of data yet. And so what we actually want to do is we want to append the data to the end, right? So let's take a look at how it's currently structured. We have this container, and then it says all campgrounds inside of it. We might have to end up moving that. But then we have this div, and this is where the magic happens. All the data for each individual campground gets put into this div. So what we have to do is append 10 more using this template right here. And so we'll do it in a JavaScript file. So we'll say script source is equal to /javascripts, just like what we have above for the cluster map. But this one is going to be, we'll just call it pagination.js. And so if we go to public JavaScripts, new file, pagination.js. Okay. So I'm just temporarily going to place this inside of here. We'll do something with it in a minute. Basically, this is going to be our template that we use to append whenever we get the data back. So we got to think about this. Anytime this button is clicked, where is it? Our view more button right here. We need to send a GET request using this href, and then whatever data comes back, we need to append that data to the page. Okay. So over in Campgrounds, on the first load of the page, we always want to get the first set of campgrounds. So we can leave this like this, right? Where we basically just say if rec.query.page does not exist, yikes. Then go ahead and render this stuff here. Okay, so watch what happens. We refresh, there's no rec.query. If we go down to the bottom and we go view more, you can see this little wheel is still spinning up here. It's because it's frozen now. This if statement said, oh, there's no rec.query.page, or sorry, there is rec.query.page now. So it ignores what's inside of here and it does nothing. There's no response. So you can refresh it. It goes back to Campgrounds. We're good. Okay, so now we need to handle what happens here. Well, if there is a rec.query.page, then we go to else. And at this point, we still query for Campgrounds, but this time we're passing in the next page. So now we have to go back to Mongoose Paginate and figure out how to do that. Hopefully there's an example here. So the options, you can tell it which page you're on. Okay, cool. So here we do the populate thing, that's part of the options, but we also need page, and this is just going to be, what we can do is we can do a little destructuring, which I always like to use this one. I just feel like it's a cool new feature that they created. So in this case it's called page and we're setting it equal to rec.query. So now we're extracting the value for rec.query.page and assigning it to a variable called page. So then here we can just put the variable page and put a comma and that handles it. So then again we're going to do our eval require locus. Okay, so if we refresh the page, nothing crazy going on here. If we click view more, we're getting an error, so that's exciting. That's interesting. Page is equal to invalid argument read. Dasync locus campgrounds JS line 24. Alright, so for whatever reason locus is being buggy, so what we're just going to do here instead is we're just going to cancel, we're going to console, actually what we'll do, we won't even have to go to the console, we'll do a res.send campgrounds, that's it, res.send campgrounds. So if we refresh this page, there it is, here's the docs, and it looks like the first object here has the pop-up information, so I think that's good. That was what we wanted with the populate stuff. It has all the geometry info, the title. So the title here, you'll notice, is SAEPE as opposed to whatever it was, Facere, F-A-C-E-R-E before. If we go down, check it out, we're on page 2, and guess what? Next page is page 3. Okay, so this is JSON data. We can make it work with JSON. Then we just need to send it to the user now. So in this case, we're just sending it to the browser. The browser, I have an extension or whatever, and it just puts it out so that we can inspect it, which is great. But what we want is we want the client-side JavaScript to look at it and say, this is what this is. Now we can take the data from it and we can put it on the page. So we're going to do res.json, actually let's do a res.status is 200.json campgrounds, and then if we go over to pagination, first we'll go back over here and we'll give this this link an ID, and we'll call it Paginate. Okay, and then we'll go back to pagination, and we'll say const paginate is equal to document.getElementById is paginate. And then we need to do a paginate.addEventListener.click, and then this has a function that has an event. And so what we want to do is prevent the default from happening whenever the event gets fired off. So instead of sending the actual request, we just say stop, don't do that. And then we want to send our own request. And so now we have to figure out how to send that request. So we can use XML HTTP request, which is kind of verbose, or we can use one of these newer ones like Axios or Fetch. I think Fetch is probably the one that's going to do the trick here because it's a native API. So let's go ahead and look that one up. I'm going to jump back over here and just check the comments real quick. Yes, this project is from Colt Steel. Hey, Anton. Emmanuel, working on YelpCamp again. That's cool. I think the Git course is the one that Colt created, unless you're referring to my intro to Git. But either way, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And then, long time no see. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for being here and watching. Thanks for the 9 likes. And let's get back to it. So the title is a little misleading. I called it infinite scroll, and we can turn this very easily into infinite scroll. But right now we're just going to do pagination. So I use pagination to convert it to infinite scroll. That's essentially what infinite scroll is it's just a different type of pagination. So pagination is where you go down and you can, there's actually like 1, 2, 3, 4. And what I'm doing is I'm just saying when you want more, you just click on view more. And then at some point, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, whenever I have some free time, we'll come back and we'll integrate this infinite scroll library, or we'll just code it ourselves probably. But basically we'll listen for the scroll bar to hit the bottom of the page, or like go past this part right here. And as soon as it goes past, we'll automatically use JavaScript to send this request. So the user won't have to click the button. For now, for simplicity's sake, we're going to click the button, and then in a future video, we'll come back and make it to where it happens when you are scrolling. Okay, so this is what happens when you click the button. We call the button paginate. When you click on it, we're preventing the default, and then we need fetch. So we're going to go fetch MDN over here and just get the usage for it real quick. Using fetch. Okay, so we're just going to paste in this example. So it says you do fetch with some URL. In this case, our URL is /campgrounds, and then question mark page, and then this is going to be dynamic based on the page. So this is interesting because there's a couple different ways we can do this, but what I would be inclined to do, let's think about this. When the page loads initially, yeah, this is interesting. This would be page 2, so you could just take the href, right? So you could say prevent default, and then let page, or let href equal to this dot, I think this dot href. We might have to use adder or something like that. In fact, we can just throw a debugger in here. This is a great opportunity to show you guys how to debug on the front end if you're not already familiar with this. So we open up the Chrome console, or in my case the Brave console, because Chrome sucks, and refresh. Paginate.addEventListener is not a function. Okay, so that's interesting. Paginate.addEventListener click. It's not a function. I think there's just something in here. It doesn't like this random string or something. That was probably it. So when we click view more, it pauses it in debugger because we put the debugger keyword right here. So this is similar to what I was showing you a moment ago with Locus, except Locus is for Node.js on the back end and debugger is for JavaScript on the front end, which in the browser uses the Node engine, which is interesting. But anyway, so here we have access to the variables, and we can say, okay, paginate. So there's paginate right there. And so now if we say paginate.href, you can see there's that entire href. It actually takes this relative URL or relative path, and it appends it to the host, which is localhost 3000. Okay, so what we can do is say href is equal to this.href. We don't even have to do that. There's no reason to do that. But what we can do though is we can say fetch this.href. And then the response is response.json, so whatever the JSON is, and then the data from that JSON, so you invoke response.json. This next promise that you're using .then with is going to give you the actual JSON data. So then you have your data here, and you can console log the data. So that's what we're going to do initially. We're just going to console log it. We'll move this over so that it's a little easier to read. And just in case they don't have a catch on here, but let's go ahead and catch any potential errors. And so we actually don't need this guy. We can just console log the error if there is one. Okay, so what we should be getting back here, if we refresh the page, nothing's going to happen. If we click view more, now unexpected token in JSON at position 0. This is interesting. But you can see here the issue is that we did a GET request to localhost 2000/undefined. So that's interesting. I wonder if that's coming from this, that error right there. So we click view more, error. So the syntax error is what it gives us back. It is catching it, but the undefined part is tripping me up. So maybe this .href So it says this .href is undefined. I could have sworn that we just saw that it was not undefined. So something weird is happening. So we go to console, this. Oh, what is happening? You know what's happening? This is pointing to the window because we're using an arrow function, which is a total gotcha that happens with arrow functions, where if you use them over just the old ES5 functions, you don't have access to lexical this, the scope for this. So normally we would think that this is whatever was clicked, right? So this should refer to paginate, which is this element. But whenever you use the arrow function, you lose access to that. It just gives you the scope of, so like for instance, in the console, if I type this, it's the window. But with using an arrow function, it's also the window. It's the scope of where the function was called. So if you click view more, and now we're in the debugger, and we click this, there it is. There's that this.href. So I'm not sure why it let me see it before. That's weird. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, it's working now. So if we take that out and we leave this.href, we should refresh, click view more. There it is. There's the data, the docs. So these are the next 10 docs. So the question is, how do we append these docs to the page? And how do we extract the data from the docs? So this is all the fun stuff that we get to do. So basically over here in EJS, we just plug it in with EJS. Well, over here in the front-end JavaScript, we got to do it a little differently. So what we could do is maybe we could just write like a function or something that plugs it all in for us. So we say like function, let's just call it, I don't want to call it create campground because it's not really creating a campground, but we'll call it generate campground, and it takes in a campground, and then what it's going to do is pipe out this string right here. So here we're going to say let, we can't call it campground. I mean, we could technically, but that's kind of confusing. So we'll call it template is equal to this thing, and then now, oh, this is exciting. The campground, we have to do a loop. Oh man, so this could actually get tricky. Yeah, I have to think about that for a second. So here we have error, or sorry, here we have data. We're logging the data, but instead of logging it, we're going to open this up, and we're going to say data, which is campgrounds, dot docs, which is all of the different campgrounds, dot for each. We don't even have to use for each. We can say for const campground of data dot docs, and then in here we can say let, again using the word campground. So in this case we'll just call it let template equal to campground, or sorry, generate campground is our function down here, and we pass in the campground. And so what we're hoping to do is generate this template with all of the data from the campground, each individual campground in the loop, and then once we get that, we can just one by one append them to the end of the DOM. So here we can return, it's not going to be called campground, it's going to be called template, the template out of this function, so that way we can assign it to this variable template whenever we invoke the function with the campground passed in. Whew. All right, so this is the campground that's coming in is each campground and campground.docs or data.docs. And so for some stuff, it's really easy, right? So for campground title, it stays the same. The only difference is we're no longer using this syntax right here for EJS. We're actually using the template literal syntax. And then you just go over and get the closing and change it to that. And so that handles everything inside the card body. The only tricky thing is the images. So, oh, this is interesting. There's only one image. So here it's saying if the campground images.length, then put in the camp. Oh, okay. There isn't a loop. I thought there was a loop. So it's just saying if there are any images at all, pull the first image. If there's not, you use this. Let's go take it. Oh, this is actually, it might be that picture right there. Oh, it's a different picture. But anyway, it's a default picture. Cool. Oh, what a relief. So basically, let's think of how we can do this. Probably what we can do, we might even be able to do it with the template literal. We may not even need. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and just change it to template literal syntax. And then instead of having an else statement, I wonder if we could do something like campground images.length question mark. Put in the URL. Otherwise, put in the string right here. Okay. So in that case, we get rid of this if else, which was useful in the EJS, but in this case, it's not. And that might work, just to make sure we're not messing ourselves up. I use single ticks on that guy. So basically we're saying campground images.length. If there's a length for campground images, then return this guy inside of the source. Otherwise, return all this jazz. And that might actually work. We'll find out. All right, so then that returns the template. Now we need to go back and be able to append it to this container. I think append is what we want. So it's called containers. This should be the only container in here, but just to be 100% sure, in case another container gets added for some reason in the future, we'll also just call this one a campgrounds container or something. It's not a big deal. All right, so if we save that, we go over here, duplicate this, and we call it campgrounds container, and then we get it by ID, campgrounds container. Then down here, we say for each of these, let the template equal to generate campground, pass in the campground. That gives us the template that gets generated from this function down here. And then we just say campgrounds container dot append template. And if this works just by doing this, that'd be awesome. That'd be so cool if it. And when it works the first time, that's when you know you're having a good time. All right, so initially we've got Fasir, that's the first one, and then you go down, there's 10 or whatever. If we click view more, okay. So it gives us the text. It's just appending the text. So there's something, I'm doing something wrong here. I think maybe I'm using a jQuery method. Is it append element? Is that what it is? Parent node.append. Maybe it's because we need to actually create an element, which could be tricky. Because I feel like if we were just using jQuery, which I don't even think we have jQuery available, then we could just use append. So this is interesting. We have to figure out how to append. Let's see. Is a sequence blah blah blah. I wonder if it wants us to create every single element and then add like the text and stuff to it, which would just be a nightmare. So how are we going to solve this? This person is using jQuery, which is great. It makes it so much easier. And then people are saying like, oh, you can use like underscore or mustache. So for the sake of just making sure that it works, let's use jQuery, but then we'll come back and we'll do it with vanilla JavaScript, because I know everybody these days is like, oh, I don't want to use jQuery. So I don't, oh, you know what, we have jQuery, because this uses Bootstrap, right? Or does it use vanilla? I think, depending on which version of Bootstrap Colt uses. So let's go to Layouts, Boilerplate, Alpha 5. So then if you go down to the JavaScript, you get Popper, and then you get Bootstrap. It's actually not using jQuery anymore. So that's all good. What we would do is over here in index, right before pagination, we would just do another script. Source is equal, actually, I copied the whole script. All right, so we'll use jQuery momentarily, and then we'll switch it up later. So campground.container.append, this would probably need to switch to this just to make it, and then we'll put a $sign here so that we know it's, and let's see what happens there. Let's see if that solves all of our problems. Refuse to load the script because it violates, oh, this is like the most annoying part of these new browser security features. So in app.js, somewhere in here, we've got this like crazy section for these directives that we use with Helmet. And so this is going to be in script source URLs. Let's go up here, script source URLs. So we have to like plug this in. You don't have to put the whole thing. You just say anything from jQuery.com is fine. And then if you refresh, it works. Okay. So basically what all that does is it's just saying like, we trust any URL that comes from jQuery.com. And you could be more explicit and do the full URL if you wanted. But it's a security feature to make sure that people aren't just like plugging junk into your app. So, oh, look at that. It worked. So sort of. So the first one is SAEPE. That's great. The problem is here is that the view more is in the wrong spot. Okay, so we need to move that. Should be really easy. We just need to move it outside of that div, and hopefully it still maintains the styling. Okay, so check it out. So it appended the new ones. Scroll down. Now, if you mouse over view more, it still says page equals 2, which is a problem, right? So then in the pagination script, whenever we're done with all of this for loop, then we have access to the page, not page number, next page. We can destructure it. It's equal to data. So data.nextPage page will give us the next page. And then remember, we still have access to this. So then we can say this.href is equal to this is interesting. So probably the easiest way to do it is to say this.href.replace, and then we would want to replace, I don't know, let's go jump over the regular expressions. So we can figure out how to replace it. Any digit. So boom. We'll just do, you have to put a backslash before it. Replace any digit. There's only going to be one. So we'll go to the cheat sheet, and we just want to make sure that there's so this is exactly 5. We want it to do exactly 1. So does it go like this? 1 digit? We can test it over here. Okay, So then if you do more digits, it's doing them individually, which is good. Oh, this is tricky because the pages could go past 1 digit. So maybe not. So maybe you put a star. Yeah. For 0 or more, not 0 or more. 1 or more. So it can be 1, or it can be 10, or it can be 100. It's going to match it, and then it's going to replace it. So in this case, we do \d, which is any digit, match any digit. By the way, this is a regular expression in case you hadn't figured that out. So regular expression matching any digit, so no alpha number, like no alphabet characters. So anything from 0 to 9, and then 0 or more, or sorry, 1 or more. So it's going to take this .href. Oh, this is going to screw us up too, because watch. Check it out. If our URL is localhost 3000, look at that. It takes 3000. And then so it would be /campgrounds page is equal to 1. So it matches 1. That's great. So what we actually have to do is we have to say page, and there's like, you have to put like brackets around it or something. Let's see here. We want to match. We might be able to do -w. No, it doesn't. Let's see here. Oh, capture group. There we go. Page. Maybe the capture group happens after. God, still not matching it. Something is wrong here. Let's see. I'm not really good with regular expressions, as you can see. That's why I'm using this cheat sheet. But we're going to figure it out. Oh, I'm an idiot. There's an equal sign there. I'm like, why is it not matching? So then, do you even need the capture group? No. So page equals 1, just to be sure, let's do something like something equals 1. Yeah, so trip, man. Regular expressions are super powerful, but only if you know how to use them, right? All right, so this .href is equal to this .href.replace page equals 1 with a string page is equal to, and then a template literal next page. So are there other ways that you could do this? Yeah, for sure. But this is just the first thing that comes to mind. So then it's going to change the href property. At least that's what we're hoping it does. So initially, if you look at it in the bottom left corner over here, it says page is equal to 2. You click on it, and then you scroll down, and now it says page is equal to 3. Yes. Click on view more, scroll down, page is equal to 4. So every time we click it, it's taking the data that comes back from the server, pulling the next page, and then updating the href for this anchor tag that we have styled as a button, and changing it to where we're always getting the new data. So what this does is, instead of, like I said, rendering like 1,000 of these at once, it's just gonna render 10, and then you go click view more, and it gives you 10 more. So I am seeing something that's kind of interesting here, and it looks, this is just like a styling thing. If there's a ton of text, it like pushes down below the image. The image is like a fixed height. Anyway, that's not anything to do with this particular tutorial, so I'm not going to fool with it. But it is just an interesting thing that I noticed for posts that have more text than the area allowed. How you could solve that is that you could just do a, because this is the preview and you're actually going to click view to go to the actual page, you could do a substring and just get a little bit of the text and then put a ... at the end. So that's for another lesson, for another tutorial. But so what we've achieved so far is that we're going to our Campgrounds index, and initially gives us 10 results instead of like 1,000. And then if you still want to see more, you can click view more. So In my course, code with Node, we do pagination with like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's previous next at the end. So you can go like, you can click on any of the numbers, or if you're on page 2, you can click next and it'll go to page 3 or whatever. And so that's true pagination. What we're doing here is we're utilizing pagination to create an infinite scroll, but rather than having it to where it automatically scrolls at the bottom, like they have with the infinite scroll, let's see if we can get an example. Full page demo. So watch as I'm scrolling down. So watch the scroll bar. It keeps adding more stuff, right? So yeah, could we do that? We definitely can. That's probably going to be a longer video, so we'll come back and do that another time. But in the meantime, what we've created for now is this nice little button here where you can just save your server from having too much of an overload, trying to load too many posts at one time or too many campgrounds at one time. Now you can just do them 10 at a time, and it's easier for the user to digest. So that's it for now. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Jump over here real quick. Looks like there's a bunch of comments and stuff. Oh yeah, people telling me, I think you're missing the equal sign. Yeah, sorry. I need another monitor so I can see the comments while I'm doing this. Yes, I do use DuckDuckGo, man of culture. Yeah. And then just a bunch of random stuff. Make the button invisible, and if scroll reaches end of page, simply run click. So Marco, that's a good idea, but the thing is you don't even need the button at all. If you're determining that you're at the end of the page using whatever pixels you're currently at, then you can just automatically send the API request. There's no need to have the button at all. But I like your thinking. That is definitely one strategy. You could just hide the button. So I'm going to stick around just for a couple minutes and do a Q&A if anybody has any questions. I see there's quite a few people here. So if you have any questions, lay them on me. I'll be happy to answer them. And otherwise, I'm going to dip out in a couple of minutes. So if you have questions, leave them in the chat, and I'll answer them before I get out of here. And then I'll push the code that I created here to GitHub, and I'll put it in the description of this video. The live videos don't generally get too many views after you're done with the live session. So probably what I'll do is take this video and upload it as an actual video, and it'll have the description with the links and everything. Okay, so I'm going to leave this stuff open. That way I can link all the different resources that I used. We never got to the infinite scroll part. There's a project I did with a student during a tutoring session years ago where we built this ourselves. So I don't know that we need a whole library. I'm not sure how big the library is, but it says it's 10% smaller file size. But if we can just do it in a couple lines of code without a whole library, that's even more efficient. So that'll be a future video live stream. So in case you want to make the button optional to the user's button or just scroll, directly running the function connected to the button click button is the way to go. Yeah, exactly. So you take all the logic that's inside of that callback for the button click, and you just use that as if the button was clicked, but instead it's just the user's reaching the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to turn off my display capture and blow that up a little bit. So yeah, a couple more minutes. Anybody has any questions, put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and dip out. I'm just over here deleting some of the random spam messages. All right, cool. So I'm not seeing any messages coming through with any questions. So thank you everybody for watching this live stream. Hopefully you enjoyed it and learned a little something. And wait, someone has a question. So it says, why are you not using some framework like Vue or React or Angular? So is it part of some project? Like, okay, so Vlad, this particular project, YelpCamp, is from a course on udemy.com called the Web Developer Bootcamp. It's created by Colt Steele. And so I'm a teaching assistant for that course. So from time to time, I'll add some additional tutorials for some of the projects in it. So that's what this project is that we were looking at, YelpCamp. I don't have my screen pulled up anymore, but so that's what that was. The only framework that we're using there is the backend framework Express. But yeah, there's no client-side framework, which is just not big enough of a project, I think, to include a client-side framework like Vue or React or Angular. So while you could certainly do something like that, in my opinion, if you unless you have a large project, you don't necessarily need all that extra stuff to slow down the load time. If you can write it from scratch, then that's probably the way to do it. But to each their own. Some people prefer the framework. Appreciate the subscription. Thank you. Yeah, if you want to check out that course, go to the link in my channel, topratedtechcourses.com, and you'll see it there. It's the Web Developer Bootcamp 2021. All right, cool. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and we will catch you all in the next video.